Welcome to the Made for Agriculture podcast with Adam, Cameron, and Emily. Today's hosts are Adam Jones and Cameron Horine.
All right, folks. Welcome to another episode of the Made for Agriculture podcast. My name is Adam Jones.
And I'm Cameron Horine.
And welcome back to another week. We've got our crew of regional agronomists here. We're going to have a little around the horn discussion of what's going on out there in the countryside. Morning, everybody. Last week was our MFA Training Camp, where we bring pretty much all of our staff in and give them some hands-on training as far as what's going on in the countryside, trying to keep those topics timely. This year, obviously we had a lot about weed control, had some stuff about forages, just got folks out there, got them exposed to what's going on in the agronomy world. And I believe that every single person on this call this morning was some part of leading one of those stops, which is awesome. So if you guys want to mention anything about what you talked about last week to all our MFA folks out there at training camp, you're free to do that as well. But I suppose for this morning, we're getting kind of late in the season now. I think we're pretty much everything's in reproductive stages, corn and soybeans anyway. But let's see what's going on out there in the country. So let's kick it over. Scott, you're first on my screen, so let's go there.
Good morning. Corn in our area has, the earliest corn has reached kind of that R4 to R5 stage. We do still have, we pretty much wrapped up fungicide on all but the latest planted. Some of that will continue to kind of trickle in over the weeks to come. As far as, think of anything else in corn, I mean, we are starting to find some southern rust in our area. We were a little bit behind. It was kind of interesting when it showed up. It showed up in Kevin's area first. I had folks out, looking for it really hard, and they were finding everything else but southern rust. But last week we started to have that kind of trickle in. A few years ago, it seemed like it showed up in northeast Missouri and even kind of curved around towards Memphis and that area before it showed up in more of the central part of the state. It seemed to run up the river a little bit, and I don't know exactly the dynamics of all that. And I did not, as I was talking to some folks, I did not see exactly how the hurricane tracked, and the remnants of that a couple weeks ago, and it sounded like, it did not go the way that I had. By the time I picked it up, it had already kind of made it up into northeast Missouri. And I didn't see how it tracked, so it made a little more sense once I saw that tracking as to how that came. But like I said, it has showed up along with, obviously we're still finding tar spot and those things. So switching over to beans, we're starting to find some disease in beans as well. Most of our beans, I guess back up just a little bit, have hit at least a lot of our beans have hit R3. At least late R2, R3. We've got some beans that are already, moving R4, R5. So bean fungicide has picked up quite a bit. Most of those applications will also have an insecticide in with them as well. Disease-wise, started to see a little bit of sudden death in the last week. But Phytophthora is one that really popped up, and just seemed like as we pick these rains up, after a rain event, you'll just find a few more beans that have succumbed to that. I reached out to Dr. Tien at the MU lab, and he confirmed that we have not sent any plants in. We have looked at them, and they just, based on what we're seeing in the field, that's what we're calling it. Plus, we know that there's a lot of it showing up at the lab. So we will probably, I think one of the guys was taking some plants in, so we may have some things confirmed on that. But he said they were seeing a lot of it. When I asked him, from what geography, he said all over. So I think it's just probably tracking a lot of the precipitation we've had. As far as anything else really notable, started to get some reports of armyworms in the last few days. The pictures that were sent to me were in a field of teff grass. So definitely keep an eye on forages, keep an eye on those summer forages you might have just put in this summer. I haven't heard any reports, but it seems like when we have armyworms, they tend to find alfalfa, and they can work it over pretty fast. So just really be diligent on on keeping an eye out for armyworms.
Yeah, good stuff, Scott. No, I'll back you up on the Phytophthora thing. It seems like our beans really stalled out when we got super wet there, and I mean, you could in some cases see quite a few plants, and then walk out in that bad spot, and then there was 2 or 3 that looks like had basically just kind of given up the ghost to it, So I think that's something that we definitely saw all over the place. So
yeah, and it's a combination of, I mean, it's not just the weather now; it's the weather earlier in the year. When we caught some rains that kind of you get infection. Probably the most. I wrote about this in my article this week. One of the more interesting things I probably saw that illustrated this was a few years ago. We were keeping an eye on a field in Audrain County that ended up having to be replanted, and they went in there and just replanted right into it with the same variety and everything. And throughout the season, as we got additional rains, we found more and more plants dying from Phytophthora, but they were always in that original stand. It was they had obviously had tough conditions at the beginning that caused the replant in the first place, but every time beans died, it was the ones that had already been through that earlier water stress.
Gotcha. Yep. No.
As far as training camp goes, I covered a stop. I spoke to everybody about cleaning out equipment, sprayers and nurse trucks and that kind of stuff. And we have a lot of people go through that obviously are applicators, but we have a lot of our sales folks, a lot of our store staff, managers, just pretty much everybody at MFA involved in agronomy that comes through it. So I try to kind of focus it on not just on for the applicators, and the truck drivers, but, for those that are working with farmers that are spraying and, any of that kind of thing, just how to help them, do a better job and avoid some of those problems.
Sure.
So,
yeah. Good stuff. Thanks for the report this morning.
Or really, Scott, or any of you guys, you mentioned armyworms and controlling those. I don't know if it was last year, a couple of years ago, we lost chlorpyrifos, right? I don't know where the state is. I guess I can't speak on where the state of that has came back. There's been talks about having that active again. What's our best options for kind of controlling some of those things that we have today?
So I will need to check on that, because we ended up, and I want to make sure I'm current on this. So as of today at 22nd of July at 7:12, I'm not sure. I need to look.
Right, I'm not either.
So we did use some chlorpyrifos earlier in the season on alfalfa. There was, and I can't remember all the legal ins and outs of it now, but I think there were some growers and maybe an industry group, and I think actually maybe it was an industry group and one of the generic manufacturers that actually filed a lawsuit or whatever it was against that, and we did end up with having it back on the market for at least certain crops, and I can't remember if that would include. I'll just have to check to see exactly which crops, but alfalfa was one of them, because we did use some earlier in the year. Now, as it was, to get good control out of it, you needed to use the heavier rate that knocked you out of the field for quite a while. So even though we've got it back after some of the experiences we had this past year, I think I'm still going to be a Steward fan going forward for Weevil. But yeah, we'll. In fact, while you're talking to the other guys, I'll see what I can find out.
So also, there's a newer mode of action, group 28. So there was a product called Prevathon, a newer one, newer formulation that's a lower use rate called Vantacor. That is really good on caterpillars. So if we're talking about armyworms, just double check what crop you're spraying to make sure it is labeled for several different things. But double check that. But that was a pretty good option. The last go around where we had a bunch of armyworms, especially when we're dealing with a lot of fall armyworms, of course, being pyrethroid resistant. Of course, that's the main reason we're bringing up the Lorsban. So this would also be an option where we can't use Lorsban or chlorpyrifos, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, sounds good. Kevin, you're already unmuted. Let's go ahead and shift up there. I'll let you kind of give us a Retail North report there.
Sure. So, well, a couple weeks ago, we mentioned the southern rust in northeast Missouri. So the last week in the off week of the podcast, we started to find it in northwest Missouri. It's kind of weird because it's following seeing the exact same order that we're finding tar spot. But anyways, and then it started. So northeast Missouri, northwest next week, and then it's meeting in the middle. So we've got southern rust pretty much across the northern part of the state now. A lot of the fields had fungicide on them already, and it seems to be keeping it at bay. I mean, it's still there. We can still find it, but it's not really blowing up, and I think our fungicides are really helping with that. So, and then also disease is still kind of the story in the soybeans too, where Scott mentioned Phytophthora. We've been seeing that the past couple of weeks. Found some sudden death syndrome earlier this week, so that was a big deal last year. Hopefully it's a little more contained this year, but a lot of that all depends on what the conditions were at planting time. Usually cool and wet fields early in the season. This year we certainly had wet conditions, but it wasn't. I wouldn't say it was necessarily cool compared to the year before. So we'll have to see how it develops. But sudden death syndrome, that is something that infects the soybeans early in the season, and that fungus just lays dormant in the roots, and you don't really notice anything. It's not really causing a problem, and then all of a sudden you get into the reproductive stages, and that fungus lets a toxin out, and then that's what causes the foliar symptoms and kills the soybean plants. So that's what we're watching out for now in beans. On the training camp, I did give a talk there. Talked about growth staging, corn and soybeans, and kind of reinforced the methods used to do that, and then more importantly, talked about why we need to know how to properly stage those crops and what can happen if we spray something at the wrong time. Just try to help everybody understand what's going on in the plants throughout the season, and all that good stuff. So
yeah, good stuff. Thanks Kevin, appreciate it. And you're right, that is a timely topic. I think a lot of times in this group you guys throw around a lot of lingo, for lack of a better term, of V2, V3, R1, R3, R5, and everybody just kind of shakes their head and knows exactly what's going on. But it's always good to think of some of our newer staff and folks that haven't been exposed to that before, and get them to understand how important growth staging is for everything that we're talking about. So good stuff. Appreciate it this morning, Kevin.
You bet.
Jesse, you want to take it away, man? Tell us what's going on down there in southeast Missouri.
Yeah, no, which I was gone this last week, but from talking around over the weekend with a few guys, like last week was a lot slower. Started a little bit of irrigation. It was dry last week. We're looking to be dry again this week, but we got highs in the low 80s, which is very unheard of for July 20th. Not saying I won't take it, but it's just different for us. For corn, I actually got to driving around Friday with the boys looking at some other stuff, and we come across some creek bottom corn that was just looked to be B5. But outside of those outliers, like majority of our corn is R4, R5. We've even got some that's probably quarter to half milk line, and it's just moving right along. And I really see us cutting corn here towards the end of August somewhere. Scott and Kevin both mentioned southern rust, and it's showing up here. We're just seeing it. but where we're finding it is like along some power lines and stuff where the helicopter and airplanes couldn't do very good. Where we got good coverage with Travel Pro, we're not seeing it at all. The biggest thing there is on this later corn is make sure you're diligent at tassel. I wouldn't even wait to brown silk or anything. At tassel, pull the trigger, because if it's here, it's going to keep growing. It's just a matter of how bad it gets and how fast. And as we're looking, staying dry here, I know it's cooler and moisture seems good, but make sure we don't get behind on water. It's kind of one of the big things I've been talking to guys about over the weekend is this crop looks really good down here. And the last thing you want to do is, oh, it's cool, it don't look that wet, but with this north wind we have and the crop where it's at, it's going to use moisture awful fast. So just don't be behind. I'd sooner you be a couple days early as a couple days late and hurt this crop. Soybeans, we really don't have a whole lot going on. A little bit of sudden death showing up in some of these R5 and a half soybeans, which it's just biggest thing is take a mental note that, hey, I'm seeing it. So you can kind of make plans for next year, because I think we're going to have a bunch of early beans again next year from talking around. So the chances that we're dry all of March and most of April again is probably slim to none. So just make plans, whether you want to do soft drill or whatever your flavor is. Prepare for that for next year. We still got a few guys replanting some beans and some low ends, this and that, and it's more just so we got something growing there. We don't have a hairy mess. Don't expect a lot out of them, but it's better than having weeds growing all fall. I know I'd mentioned Frog Eye a couple of weeks ago, but we really ain't seeing any more out of that. I know it's here, so if we were to get wet again, I expect it to kind of ramp back up. So just as we get to that R2, R3 time framing, if your beans look good and that's something you're willing to spend money on, I highly recommend it. It's worth it. We brought up army worms. I have not seen any in my territory, but I've been hearing a lot, like in central Arkansas. They've been hammering some of the hay fields and some of the rice fields. So I really don't know how long it takes them to move up my way, but if we're seeing them around, I don't expect them to go away. Like Kevin said, your diamides are really good. We also got Intrepid Edge. That works really good from Corteva. And some other options they got to give. The rice is pretty well all heading out. With it being cooler and us having good moisture, irrigation hasn't been that hard. It's just been staying after it, however your schedule is, and just these things just keep hammering it out until we get it turned. It's another crop that I see that middle into August harvest is going to start, which is good. A lot of this stuff, the earlier we can get it out, the earlier we can get back in and get some fall work done, prepare for 2025. And then just kind of switch gears on kind of my training camp stop. Me and Doug kind of had to stop together. One part was a post-emerge treatment and one was a residual treatment. And the one thing I do want to say is we done some different applications with Liberty, and basically it come down to a single shot pass of Liberty and then a 2-shot pass of Liberty 7 days apart. So for anybody who's struggling with weed control or still spraying some stuff out there, if you got pig weeds, the 2-shot of Liberty 7 days apart is looking really, really good. I'm not going to sit here and tell you it's lights out, but it's dang sure better than anything else we've tried. Some of y'all got to see it. If you want to chime in, I'm going to say probably 80% control versus 60% control on a 1-shot Liberty. Just the big takeaways is make sure you got a gallon per 100 oil in it. Or like our Expand product, 3 quarts per 100. And just hit them hard, and you're better off at the 7 days than you are the 10 days from what we're seeing. And that's pretty well all I got, unless y'all got questions.
Nope, I don't have anything for you, Jesse. I appreciate the heads up there and good call out on the irrigation stuff. I know for you guys, it's been a little bit of a weird year with not running a whole lot of irrigation year to date.
Yeah. Me and my buddy got some beans together, and we watered the corn twice now, and the beans finally got watered for the first time over the weekend.
Yeah, which I would say for your all's part of the world be fairly unheard of. make it to July 22nd. Yeah, before you start pumping water. Yeah, good stuff. Shannon, hopefully you're still awake down there. What's going on down Southwest Missouri, Southeast Kansas?
Yeah, so not a lot different from what's already been said. We did have some corn that was planted there late May, first part of June, and it's just now tasseling. So we talked about southern rust. Southern rust is pretty much everywhere down here as well. So that stuff, I saw some planes flying on the way back from training camp. So that stuff is getting the fungicide now. And if you're on the fence about it, I just wouldn't be on the late corn with the disease pressure and as rapid as southern rust blows up. That's definitely one we want to make sure we get taken care of. Our farther along corn, not quite as far along as Jesse. Soft dough is about as far along as we are right now. But corn's kind of on the back burner. We have a little bit of irrigation, not a whole lot, but similar to what Jesse said. We want to make sure we're staying in front of it and not getting behind on watering. Soybean front, I think someone said that we don't have soybeans in the vegetative states yet. I still have a few that are still vegetative that have just emerged in the last couple weeks. And one thing that we've seen, not abnormal for us, especially in the western part of my territory, but webworm reports started coming in. So typically on those late double crop beans when we're drier, we got potential for a webworm outbreak. I don't think we're at outbreak point right now, just some fields here and there. But those webworms basically take those top trifoliates, they fold them over themselves, they make their web, kind of protecting them. That's their shelter. And they start feeding on the plant, and then they end up killing that growing point, and we lose stains, we lose beans, and that's the big threat with them. So with that also makes it kind of a challenge to spray for them, because we got to make sure we're taking quite a bit of water across the field, getting down into that trifolia, that shelter they've made, so we can get in there and kill them. Army worms, there's been a couple of reports in both soybeans and in forages. Again, little pocket, hasn't been widespread, but if Scott's finding them in central Missouri and I'm finding them in southwest Missouri, probably just a matter of time before they do start showing up. We'll know pretty quick if we're gonna have an outbreak like we did 2 or 3 years ago. Other than that, soybeans are kind of on the just kind of riding along right now. We are putting some post herbicides still on those double crop beans, but those applications are starting to back off. We had some planned fungicide, insecticide go out just because we have our full season beans hitting that R3 to kind of that R3.5. But hay's really been our bread and butter here the last couple of weeks. That's what guys have been focusing on. A lot of native got laid down this week and rolling up before the rain start again. At training camp, I talked about short corn. Talked about pros and cons and compared the different management practices from what we're used to with traditional high corn to what we have with short corn, and the possibilities whenever we get hybrids that are suited for our areas.
Good stuff. Thank you, Shannon, very much. Appreciate it. I know you guys are a little different scenario down there with so many of your soybean acreage being double crops. I guess I'll just chime in real quick since the rest of you guys did. I helped Garrett Imhoff, our staff agronomist, with a training camp stop. I think we covered something that was really, really timely for a lot of folks, especially going out there making that R3 soybean fungicide pass right now. Kind of talking about the difference between, we all know we should, fungicide our beans. I think we do a pretty good job on the podcast here, not making product endorsements specifically or anything like that, but we use the word fungicide kind of ubiquitously, and talking about the difference between generic products and branded products. And when you start looking at data and things that we have all looked at and use to make recommendations that we are making, trying to understand what we're doing and setting expectations as we move to some of those generic products, both on the fungicide side and on the insecticide side of things, foliar products and those kind of things. Are we setting the right expectations as we maybe change products in a tank to cheapen up a tank mix? So it's kind of what we talked to our crew about, and I think we had some good back and forth and some good things come out of that. So Cameron, I'll kick it over to you right before we kick off, or right before we end here, if you want to throw in. I know you were out there talking about, well, you tell us.
Yeah. So, had a seed talk. Not really what you would think a normal seed talk is. We didn't go through varieties and talk about, hey, this variety should fit there. It was more focused on what the future is potentially bringing for as we build portfolios and look at the future of bringing new seed varieties on. And so, we think about transgenic GMO lines when we think about herbicide tolerances, E3s, XtendFlex, HT4s that are coming down the line, but not necessarily looking at that, but the gene editing portion of soybeans and how they can come forward and the adjustments that can be made from gene editing piece that can really speed up and amplify the process of soybean breeding and those techniques. So,
gotcha. Good stuff. Well, I think we're going to kind of, meld through our topics that everybody presented at training camp and probably pull some of the ones out and kind of do some individual podcast episodes on them in the future. So be watching out for that because there was some really cool stuff we were able to go over with our staff this week. So anyway, if we've covered it for this morning, I guess let's end there. And I appreciate all your all's time this week with training camp and everything else going on. Appreciate your time this morning, being a little delayed jumping on here, but we got her in, got her done, and appreciate everybody listening, and we'll talk to you next episode. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks guys. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Made for Agriculture podcast, brought to you by MFA, your whole farm solution.